Welcome to the MHFi podcast. My name is Carl Jensen, and I am here with my co-host.
I'm Doug Cunnington.
Doug, what is happening?
Things are great. It's sort of the height of the summer right now, and it's been hot outside. So I talk about the weather all the time, and it's been about 100 degrees, and it's great to record down here. It's about 64 or so, and it feels nice.
Yeah, I agree. It is absolutely terrible outside. I'm a person who could be comfortable outside with a t-shirt on when it's 50 degrees, so I like the cold. I err towards the cold because if it gets cold, you can put on more clothes or turn up the heat, but when it gets hot, you can't do much. You can only take off so many clothes without getting arrested out in public. So yeah, the heat does not sit well with me. This is probably my least favorite time of the year as far as weather. It's beautiful. I like the sun, the green, the hiking, although it's all going to be yellow soon here in Colorado because it's so hot. But yeah, very hot. What else have you been doing, Doug?
Well, speaking of hiking, I got out for a pretty nice hike with one of our friends and a guy named Robert, who was actually on the show here a few episodes back with Robert and Carla. And we hiked a couple 13ers. Super fun, very challenging hike. We took a day off on a random Tuesday, so not many people on the trail. And it was Paiute Peak and Mount Audubon. So those are over by like Brainerd Lake, if people are familiar. And yeah, it was fantastic. A lot of scrambling. So we took a very steep route. We're sort of using it as like training for climbing Long's Peak sometime soon. So it was tough. We had to wake up at about 4 a.m. to get on the trailhead early enough. And, I ended up doing pretty well. I wasn't sore afterwards. It's up high enough in elevation where you take a few steps and then you have to take a break, and then you take a few more steps and take a break, and then you're trying to navigate scrambling. Essentially, there's no trail for a lot of the most challenging areas, so you're kind of scrambling, and you have to use your hands and that sort of thing. So,
okay, so I know you did Long's Peak a long, long time ago when you were a much younger man. I've never done it before, but I'm planning to with you, hopefully in September. How similar was that scrambling to what's at the end of Long's Peak? I think all the scrambling at Long's Peak is at the very end, the trough, it might be called.
Right. And then, so it's been long enough that I don't remember as well. So I think it was very similar in the scrambling portion, and maybe even the length is roughly the same as far as that, sort of class 2 and class 3 climbing that you're doing. But with longs, you're hiking 6.5 miles before you even get to that point. So you're pretty tired. Of course, it's a little bit higher, but it's nominal. So we did talk to another hiker who, it's like I hit puberty again. We talked to another hiker who recently climbed longs, and he said that it is very similar, but longs is just longer, there's more of it, and you don't get to that challenging part for several miles. So by the time you get there, you've already done like sort of a normal hike.
I have to admit, Doug, that I'm a little scared of Long's Peak. I've done 14ers before, including a bigger one, Mount Whitney in California, but that one is just basically a very, very long walk. There's no steepness. It's much longer, but it's very gradual. So I think longs will be a much bigger challenge. Plus, like you, when you did longs, I was much younger. So I'm curious to see how this one goes.
I was I'm scared of doing longs again, but doing this hike gave me more confidence. And I just chatted with Robert recently after the hike, and he said, I feel much better about doing longs. Cause I mean, it's a pretty long stretch of like scrambling and getting up, very steep. And the cool thing with longs, there's going to be enough people. There's going to be folks in front of us that we could just sort of follow the path that they're taking. So we won't have to figure it out. In fact, Robert's a great hiker, and I was trying to keep up with him. And the thing is, I had him lead most of the time and sort of do the trailblazing and figure out where we were going to go. It's very mentally taxing to figure out, is this a safe route? Like if you fall, if you slip in all this gravel, like how far are you going to fall down? So, but once I'm scared of heights generally. I don't like working on roofs or anything like that, or climbing up ladders and having to hop from like a ladder to the roof or anything like that. And, you're on some ledges, but, usually, at least the height that we did, if you fall, you would just fall like a couple feet till the next boulder. I mean, it wouldn't be fun or anything. On longs, you can fall like hundreds of feet or thousands of feet in a couple areas. Obviously, that's bad. So there's some handrails and stuff in those more treacherous areas, but it will be challenging. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures. I think they call that part the ledges. And yeah, I have to say, when you look at something online, it's usually, in my opinion, less intimidating than doing it in person. So I'm not looking forward to that part either. Maybe I'll call in sick that day.
Well, I think we should try. I would hike the Paiute and Audubon again. And like I said, that's a great training run. Like after doing that, I feel a lot more confident to do some scrambling and whatnot. So yeah, we could do it again. The great part is up at the peaks at like 13,000 feet, the temp was like 48 degrees up there, but it was sunny. So it felt awesome. It felt really nice up there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, we've just been entertaining. There's lots of people coming through town. We just had the Waffles come through town, Ray and Sarah, who we interviewed. And Alan and Katie Donegan from the Rebel Entrepreneur Choose FI podcast are going to be in town next week. But I have a funny story to tell you, Doug. We had a bunch of people over a couple weeks ago, and I don't know, there was probably 20 or 30 people at our house. You've seen our backyard. We've got this big deck and a pool. And the next morning, Mindy comes running in with this bottle of Magic Lube, and she goes, "Was this out here last night for the party?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh my God, everyone saw this." I'm like, "So what's the big deal?" I'm like, "That's a pool gasket lubricant. We lube the O-rings on that so that they don't leak water." She's like, "Yeah, but if you don't know that, it looks like a sexual lubricant." And this was just laying out here on the deck, and it says Magic Lube in these huge letters. So she was freaking out. So now, Doug, I feel like anyone who comes over who was at that party, I have to break out the bottle of Magic Lube and explain it to them. And I'm sure people tend to be selfish, and they think that other people see a lot more than they really do. So I'm sure no one actually notices. But now I'm kind of curious if some people did notice this and think we do the deed out there on the back pool deck, which wouldn't be good because all the neighbors would see it, and there'd probably be lots of neighborhood gossip about us. So if you saw it at any time, Doug, that is an O-ring lubricant and not a sexual lubricant. But maybe we can have Magic Lube as a sponsor sometime if you're listening, Magic Lube people. And maybe they do have a sexual lubricant too. I don't know. Maybe that's another business line for them. They could compete with KY. I feel we need some innovation in that space.
Right. Yeah, I think we'll have to do an episode Mile High After Hours or something like that to get into some of these other topics. But yeah, I mean, if they want to sponsor us, I mean, we could test it out, see how the stuff works, make sure it's a high quality lubricant, maybe get some flavors in there if we can. Are we talking the industrial stuff, or that you could use on O-rings? Or
they would have a sweet spot if they did an all-purpose one. Like, it's good for intimate relations, it's good for pools, it's good it's edible and rubber safe. The pool O-ring rubber's not the other kind, but it would be safe for that as well. So yeah,
versatility. Yeah, is there some kind of magic substance that can do all those things?
It would be truly magic if it could do all those things.
All right. Well, that got off the rails real early. Anything else going on with you?
I think that's it. We should get into the actual point of the podcast, the actual topic of the podcast.
Oh, quick. Well, before we do, I want to give quick plug to a couple things. One, EconoMe. So you're going to be speaking at EconoMe, and we just talked to Diana in a recent episode. So you want to tell us just a little bit about EconoMe, or what you're looking forward to, or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, I don't know it. Well, I am looking forward to it, but I'm also kind of terrified because there's about 700 people there, and I think they've almost sold it out, but not quite. So yeah, I was in my mind, I was like, well, maybe it'll be like last year with COVID and only 200 people will show up, but no, and that'll be good because I won't have to talk, but it would be bad because Diana would lose money on it. So it turns out it probably will be sold out, which means that I have to give a talk in front of 700 people, which is slightly terrifying. But yeah, so this is a weekend at the University of Cincinnati in Ohio, obviously. Cincinnati's in Ohio. I can't remember. Is it November 12th? It's one of the first weekends in November. I'm sorry, I should know that. So it's a weekend event, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a bunch of talks, some round tables with, I know JD Roth is going to be there, Joel Saul Seahigh. So lots of big names there. Maybe Mr. Mighty Mustache. Don't quote me on that. I don't think he's formally committed to it yet. But yeah, it should be a good time, and I have to speak in front of 700 people, and I think I have to have my talk written in like 2 weeks, and I've barely thought about it. Can you write speeches, Doug? Are you any good at that? Or?
I could try. I could try, yeah. And I was going to say, I have been on the fence trying to figure out my fall schedule, a lot more travel this year, so I am just trying to plan properly. But I think yesterday I decided that I'm going to book tickets for EconoMe and go to it as well. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah. So I need to figure out like when you're flying out and stuff, because you're going a little early and hanging out a bit.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe a day or so early. So that'll be great if you do the same. We could go explore Cincinnati a little bit.
Yeah. And then FinCon, we're attending that. And I got good news the other day. I'm speaking there. So it will be on a YouTube topic. And I'm pretty excited. The sort of cool thing, and I haven't told you this yet. So I was, I applied and I didn't hear anything back. And I thought, oh, you know what? Not going to make it this time. That's cool. No big deal. And then they told me that I was accepted, but they didn't tell me if it was going to be like an in-person because it's a huge conference, right? Like there's some huge sessions and such. So I was nervous. I was very nervous thinking I'm going to have to talk in front of a lot of people, and I haven't done that before. Luckily, I'm not going to get pushed too far out of my comfort zone. It's a recorded session, so I literally can record it down here, and it'll either be played or just available online. I'm not sure how they're doing that exactly, but still, it's an honor to be selected.
Doug, I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed because I was looking forward to you giving a speech in person, and if it had come down to that, I would promote the shit out of it. So the room might have had a capacity of 100, but I would be out in the halls trying to recruit people to come to it. Like, I know it's only 100, but Doug really needs 400 people. If he gets 400 likes, he's going to do something. I don't know. You see those stupid tweets, right? So
yeah, and it would have been okay. I think we'll figure it out for some time, but yeah. So I'm speaking there. We're going to be there. So, people, if you haven't booked your tickets or whatever, check it out. And finally, and that'll be my first FinCon too. You've been to a ton of them, but you're going to show me around, which will be nice to have some veterans to, show me the ropes.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun, and it's going to be in Austin this year. And for listeners, this isn't just a thing for bloggers or content creators. They actually have a community pass, which allows normal people to go there and hang out too. And in my very informal questioning of people at the last one I went to, that sounds ominous, questioning of people, like I was interrogating I was waterboarding the attendees, but I would say between 10 and 20% of people were on that community pass. So they were just people who didn't create any content that just wanted to come there and hang out and see these people whose blogs they read or the podcasts they listen to, the content creators. And it was really cool. Hanging out with those people were some of the most fun because, I don't know, they appreciated the content, and you weren't just talking about SEO and that kind of shit. You were having a beer and talking about whatever came up. So
right. And as someone who's only been to one conference like this, I think there could be, I don't want to get in trouble here. There could be some agenda when people walk up to you if they are promoting something and they think maybe you can help them like grow, which, technically a person could, right? But if they don't have a blog and they're there on the community pass, they're just hanging out. They just want to chat with you or whatever. They have no agenda, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, maybe someone will have an agenda to get your autograph, Doug, or a selfie with you.
There's been a lot of questions about the mesh t-shirts and stuff. So we do need to circle back. It's been busy this summer, but we could find a supplier so it's comfortable. It won't chafe nipples or anything like that.
The neon green mesh tank top.
Yeah, mile high. Okay. And then the final thing before we get in, this is a mailbag segment. I mean, that's the title of it, so everyone knows. We got some great questions, but the last thing is just MHFi. So we got back. I had a great time. It was super fun. I think we may do an episode where we talk about it a little bit more, but it was really fun. It wasn't too busy. I think some conferences or some gatherings or retreats, they're filled with way too many activities and you get tired. This had a lot of open space. So we were able to really just talk and chat, go on hikes and hang out quite a bit. So I had an awesome time, probably going to some others in the future. And any thoughts on MHFi?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said is correct. The downtime is, this sounds like I'm dissing MHFi, but the downtime was some of the best time. So what MHFi is, there's about 4 talks that are probably 20 to 30 minutes long. There's a couple round tables, and then the rest of it is downtime and just having lunch. But what it does is it encourages interaction with everyone who goes to these things, which is the most, it might not seem like it, but it's the most valuable part of the whole thing. So the way Stephen has set it up is it really lends itself and leads to that. And you make connections there. I've talked to a bunch of the people on email already, and we're going to have probably a little reunion when Alan and Katie come to town in August. So yeah, I thought it was great. Those have been some of my favorite things to attend in the FI space, and I think I've been to like 5 or 6 of them now. I'm probably an addict. I should probably join a group or something to talk about it, and I'm sure I'll be to many more. I guess if I could pick one thing to continue to attend, it would probably be that. And they're having 2 more, I believe, this year. There's one in Minnesota, which is Labor Day weekend, and I did attend that one. It's really, really beautiful, right on I think the St. Croix River. Don't quote. No, it's not the St. Croix River. That's what the place is called. But it's right on the river in Minnesota or close to it. Just a beautiful space. So if you're anywhere near the Twin Cities or Wisconsin or Chicago, make the road trip up for that one. And there is another one in November, I think, at Joshua Tree National Park or right outside it, which sounds really beautiful too. I'd love to go out there just to see the sky at night, see all the stars because you're in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know. I can't go to the Midwest one, but I might try to hike it out there to Joshua Tree. We'll see.
Very cool. Yeah. So people check it out. I think, we'll put links and stuff so you can see if there's any availability. So this is a mailbag. So thanks for all the people that sent stuff in. We're going to get to as many as we can here. And we actually have a little feedback from our last Q&A segment. So Carl, do you want to tell us about this email that we got?
Yeah, okay. So we'll start off with that one. And this one came from someone named Gabriel. And he was very kind. He was complimentary too, so it just wasn't all anger and vitriol. So he says, I want to start this off by saying that I very much enjoyed your podcast. I started listening on day 1, I think he meant to say, and like the conversational and down-to-earth tone you guys have. And although they are long, I enjoyed listening during my 2-hour drive home from my country house. But I went back and listened to the Q&A episode, which I somehow missed. I have to say that it was sort of a big waste of time. You guys answered 3 questions, I believe. One, which was pure drivel. I don't remember. I don't even remember the questions, but okay. So then he goes on to say, this is the drivel question. What product would you like to have indefinitely? Really? This is a real financial Q&A question. I think you started off great with how you would do FI now, but then the whole thing really went to shit. I left you guys a great podcast review. Thank you for that. So I'm not a hater, and I don't think he is. I didn't take any issue with this email. But something about the pure indulgence of asparagus and pea talk. Wow, yeah, we did go in that direction, Doug. even involving the dog. I don't remember the dog being involved. Maybe we were going to feed the dog asparagus and see if the dog had asparagus. I don't remember, but it was just really tasteless. Yeah, I can't argue with that. Maybe keep the long diatribes a little briefer. They are funny, but a little goes a long way. You could have covered some serious FI questions in 1 hour and 45 minutes, but instead I felt robbed of my 2-hour podcast time. Again, this comes from a good place in my heart, not mean-spirited. What do you think, Doug?
I love getting feedback, especially thoughtful feedback. So I think he had some great points, and thanks for the review. That is helpful for us. It's funny because that was one of my favorite episodes to do. We walked out of here and we were laughing upstairs. My wife heard us laughing down here. She's like, "What are you guys doing?" It was so much fun. Did you have a good time on that episode?
Oh, yeah. It was hilarious. I had to contain myself from, I don't know if we had to edit that one, but yeah, I could. Sometimes you get to the point where you can't stop laughing and you're out of control. And which doesn't happen too often. And that was one of those times.
Yeah, it was super fun. So couple things. And then I want to go back and answer the product question again to see if we have any other thoughts now that he pointed out that it was a legit question. But I have a YouTube channel and I've done over 1,000 videos. And there's a phenomenon especially with YouTube or a similar platform, where people get burned out. So they start doing the videos that they think they're supposed to do, and it becomes work and it's not as much fun. And there's a popular YouTuber named Peter McKinnon. He's a videographer, filmmaker, photographer, YouTuber. And he's pointed out a few times, hey, if you want to avoid burnout, which he has run into a few times, you have to do some of the content for yourself. So do a video you want to do. He may do a short film to make sure that it's something that he's passionate about, even though his audience may not love it. It's not going to be as popular. It won't get as many views. So I think, without even thinking about it, I ended up, Carl's laughing at my answer already, for the people that are just listening. I feel Gabriel's already getting upset at us again, but stick with us, man. We're going to pull through. So anyway, inherently, I think I knew that we should do these episodes like this, that'll be really fun for us. And, when we're interviewing people, we're preparing ahead of time. We're really trying to do a good job. And that can be a little bit more like work. So I think it'll be important for us to do these kind of sillier episodes occasionally. It's pretty fun. And I think we have gotten other feedback that other people enjoy it too. Self-indulgent? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. So it's one of those kinds of episodes that may not be as popular, but we'll have a great time doing it. And then for the really weird people in the audience, they will enjoy listening to the just offhand stuff that is unrelated, long tangents that are a little too long. So that's my general thought. Great feedback, 100% valid. And we understand, and or at least my take is, we're selecting to do things a little bit differently than some of the more professional shows, like most of the other ones out there.
Yeah, Doug, I think that's a great point. And I was thinking while you were talking, not about what I was laughing about. I'll tell you what that is later, off air. But anyway, so the way I look at this podcast is there's a couple different things we could do. We could do a show that's just for us, something that we really enjoy, that might not make money. Hopefully it might some point. I don't know. We've never even talked about that. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. Or we could be super laser focused on growing our audience. And in that case, we would be reaching out to people on Twitter. We'd be trying to tag them so they would retweet. We'd be reaching out to influencers and telling them to listen, or trying to get them on and then harassing them to promote it. But yeah, at that point, it would just, if we did that, the thing might be way more successful. But it wouldn't be fun anymore. It would be a job, like you said. So I think if we have to err on the side of being strategic and just growing and getting a huge audience, or just being silly jerks. I think we should err on the side of being silly jerks. A lot of these will be useful, like you said. I think our interviews are good, but yeah, sometimes we're going to go off on crazy tangents. And when you hear those, we might just be doing that to amuse ourselves. And I'm sorry, or not.
And one other observation, as someone who has been guest on podcast, it's pretty fun to be a guest on a show where they do things a little bit differently versus they just hit the questions and blast through them, and it's a little too serious. Carl can't even hold it together. I'm going to try to describe his face for the people that are listening to the podcast. It's like he ate a lemon and his whole face is like scrunched up. He can't, he's trying not to laugh out loud. He's doing a okay job. Okay. I'm going to try to keep driving through here. So the question about the endless product. So my thought on this, like that was, I think our friend Carla supplied that question.
So what was the original question? Just remind me.
I think if you could have an endless supply of anything, what would it be? So as I was thinking about this, preparing for answering it again, I was thinking I usually would want to have that to be a consumable. And the largest quantity of consumables that I even purchase is probably food. So I think my answer was pizza or hamburgers, right? So I think I would still stick with some food product, but why not have your favorite food versus something else? So I don't drive that often. I don't need like an endless supply of gas. And I couldn't think of any other consumable where it would be helpful to have an endless supply. So I think I'll still stick to my food idea, but I'm not sure, what else a person would need in an endless supply. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, this is a difficult question because when I think about it, there's two ways you can go on this. It could be something you use all the time and spend a lot of money on, like your example is great gas. So if you drive 50,000 miles a year, you want a free supply of gas because that's costing you money. But another way to look at it would be something that's rare or hard to get. And I'm trying to think of an example or something that's exclusive. Like if you liked a certain type of beer, like Pliny the Younger, which is this beer released once a year. If you really like that and that really moved the needle for you in your life, you might say that it's not really money. It's just it's a rarity thing. It's hard to get. I'm trying to think of an answer I have. And I remember when that question came up, I just copied yours and said pizza too, which was completely terrible and lacked creativity on my part. And yeah, I need to think about this one a little bit more because I'm trying to think there's nothing we need that costs a lot of money. And I'm trying to think like what is rare and hard to get that we need in our life on a regular basis. It just goes back to like a good Chicago pizza. I'm stealing your answer for the second time, which makes it even worse, Doug. I'm really sorry. I'm just totally screwing this podcast.
That's all right. If you think of anything else before we finish this show, then maybe you can mention it. But just as a external observer, I know you guys go through a lot of that magic lube. Like you guys had like the Sam's Club version of it with like the squirt top thing. I mean, it was, I don't know how many O-rings you have, but
those O-rings get pretty dry, especially as they get old. I wonder if we could get a 55-gallon barrel of it just in our backyard, like just a huge thing. Would probably last us a year or something like that. But yeah, magic lube. Here we go again.
All right. I don't know if the result of us re-answering the question was any more helpful. I think perhaps we made it worse. But Gabriel, thank you for sending in the question. And we actually have a follow-up from Gabriel, but we'll come back to that one because I want to hit these couple questions from Matt who sent it in. And first one is top phone apps that you love or that are super helpful.
Yeah, so I'm going to go off on a slightly different tangent. I'm going to tell you about one phone hack, Doug, which I wrote about on the blog a while ago. I use Google Voice, which is an app that gives you a virtual phone number. So I actually don't have a phone number tied to my phone. Well, I do, but I don't even know what it is. I don't use it. So I use a virtual phone number, And what that allows you to do is make calls and do everything over data. So what I did with my phone, we have a phone plan on Ting, is I just turned off the phone part. So I don't even know how much that costs, but I just use data. So if someone calls me or sends me a text, it all goes over data. And from a technical perspective, your phone would not normally do that. It would use the cell phone network, and then the phone company would charge you like per text, or I don't know if they even do that anymore, but they would charge you for cell phone minutes. The really cool thing about this, I think they might do this anyway, even if you're on a conventional phone, is everything goes over Wi-Fi when I'm at home. So oftentimes my phone bill will be like $18 a month. And I use the shit out of my phone, but it's just, I don't use data intensive stuff. I'm not watching YouTube on the road or anything like that. And everything goes over the data network. I'm usually around Wi-Fi, so I've minimized my phone costs. And the great thing about Google Voice is there's all these features on it. Like you can block certain people. If people that you don't like call you, you could set up the thing where it goes, doo-doo-doo, the number you have called has been disconnected, like that thing. So I've done that to a couple people. Well, not now they know my secret. So yeah, that's my first one. So Google Voice is a great app. You can save money and have all the beautiful features. Another thing you can do with it real quick is forwarding. So it's a virtual number. You don't even have to have it associated with your phone. I can log on to my PC and have Google Voice forward a call to any phone in the world. It could be a landline or whatever. So it's tremendously useful. Google Voice.
Awesome. And we were chatting before we started recording, and I said, I pretty much hate my phone, and I, try not to use it too much. So I don't have any interesting apps that you haven't heard of. I watch a lot of YouTube on my phone, and I use really the Google suite of products. So I have like Gmail, YouTube Studio, I have Google Drive, Google Photos, several other things. I use an iPhone though, but I'm in Google all the time, and Google Maps, of course. And I really, like I said, I try not to use my phone too much in general, and I'm happier when I don't use it as much. So yeah, I would say the only app which crosses over for my my Macs and my iPhone is LastPass, and it's a password manager. So I use that all the time. I have these crazy long complex passwords that I don't have to remember anymore. It generates it for you. So do you use any password manager like that? Or
I do. I use the same one, and that's absolutely what you should do. LastPass is great.
Okay. So LastPass is probably the only one that's kind of interesting and, very helpful. It keeps your stuff secure, or your password secure, and stuff like that. I remember, I don't know how we would manage these days with all the different logins that we would have. You'd have to have a notebook with all your passwords, which obviously is a security issue if you actually wrote down your passwords like that. So cool. Any other apps that you want to mention?
Yeah, I've got a couple more. You mentioned the Google Suite. I use Google Keep to keep track of all my to-do items in life. Do you use that one or a different one at all? Okay.
No, I just use a notebook usually.
Okay. I think, have you ever heard of Marco Polo before?
Yeah. One of my buddies tried to get me and some other folks to use it. So you use Marco Polo?
Yeah, I have an aversion to talking to people on the phone. I don't know. It just seems weird. Like, I don't usually call friends, but Marco Polo allows you to get to some middle ground where you can record a message and then send it to them, and it's asynchronous communication, so that it sends this video message and then they can respond whenever they want. So I don't actually have to have a phone call with someone, which I really dread. I could just send this Marco Polo if I want to say something or need to do something that goes beyond text, but less needed, or when I don't need to make a phone call, or when I don't want to make the phone call. Yeah, I hate phones too. I can't stand them. I think if Steve Jobs knew what they were going to be, he might not have done it. They just suck up your time. They destroy your brain. So I try to use the phone for anything that'll give me my time back. And I just wrote a couple others down, like electronic banking. Does anyone actually, well, I suppose lots of people do this, but you don't need to go to the bank or an ATM to deposit a check. You could just take a picture of it and do that, and that takes like 30 seconds versus hours to go to the ATM or bank every month and all that stuff. Who writes checks anymore either? God, I wish there weren't checks. I
was going to say, yeah, who's writing checks? Occasionally I'll get one from my dad, if he owes me some money or something. So
yeah, it's like there's Venmo and PayPal. I guess PayPal's for older people now, according to my daughter. But one more I'll throw out there really quick is the Fitbit app. So I've got a Fitbit, which is this health rate monitor thing on the wrist. And one cool thing it has is a heart rate monitor, and it keeps track of your heart rate over time. And it's pretty cool. I wish I could say that I was the exact same weight all the time, but I'm not. And I go through periods where I work out more, and you can see it with you can see the heart rate in the app. You can see it where it's been for the past week, for the past month, and even longer periods of time. So I can look at it. I looked at it this morning and saw, wow, a couple months ago, my heart rate was high. And I remember I wasn't exercising. I put on a little bit of weight. It's pretty neat to see the fruits of your good diet and exercise in there, because you can see when you exercise and start picking up the bike again that your heart rate starts to trend down. And it's pretty motivating, I think.
And I forgot about that. I used to have a Fitbit, have an Apple Watch now. So I do use some of the same, capabilities and data that you can get, exercise, sleep, all that stuff. I think I just use like the native app in the phone, whatever it's called. It's like health or something like that. So kind of keep track of all those things. And for me, I know my like resting heart rate and like sleeping heart rate goes up when I have more than like 2 or 3 beers, like before bed-ish. So little hack, just drink earlier in the day. Doesn't impact your sleep. So I don't know. If you're not able to do that. You have to pick up your kids from school and stuff, and they don't want you coming in smelling like alcohol.
That would be bad.
Yeah. They hate that. So, okay. All right. I think we can move on to Matt's second question, top podcast that we enjoy regularly. So I will let Carl go first again here.
I'm going to have a little bit of an unconventional answer to this one. So I think Tim Ferriss is great, but his are hit and miss. But there was one I listened to that really stood out, and it's been so good that I've gone back and listened to it multiple times in my life. And this is episode number 60, and it's Tim Ferriss's interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is an interesting person. If you listen to this, he's kind of an asshole, but he's actually really smart too, and there's all kinds of little life hacks that you can take out of there. And it's very motivational too. I'll just say one thing that he mentioned in the podcast that I was unaware of. So Arnold Schwarzenegger came to America, and he started buying real estate in Los Angeles. So and this was like back in the 70s or whenever. So the guy was already a millionaire before he ever did one movie. And he was talking about how empowering this is. He would say he would go to these casting calls, and these people would be fighting over these shit roles. And he'd be like, no, I don't want that. And I don't need it. So I'm just going to leave. And these other people needed these roles. So they'd be begging to be in the cat food commercial or whatever the hell. And he was able to hold out for the movie role that suited him. And I'd never known that about him, but there's all kinds of other very interesting stuff in that podcast. I think it's like 2.5 hours long, but definitely check that one out.
And since we're plugging specific episodes, I remember that one on the Tim Ferriss show and really enjoyed it. There's a couple others that I want to point out, which I don't have super handy, but I was going to say, I know the Ramit Sethi episodes are pretty good. I think those guys are old friends. And some of the Ryan Holiday episodes, I think both of those guys have been on multiple times. And one of the things with Tim Ferriss's show, I feel like I listened to maybe the first, I don't know, like 100 episodes, and then I started picking just the episodes that I found interesting. And now, I probably only listen to 1 out of every 6 or so. And I'm not sure why, but maybe I heard enough of his like normal questions. Not that you can't get good value from it, but I don't know if it's the guest or anything like that. But any thoughts on that? Why it's sort of lost its luster?
Yeah, there's a couple reasons. I remember one specifically, and I don't want to be negative, so I won't mention the guest, but this guy was a world-class athlete. And I remember Tim, and I had known this guy. He was in a documentary, so I listened to the podcast, and it was awful. Tim would ask these multi-word questions, these huge questions. That was a stupid thing to say. All questions are multi-word. So if, what? Anyway, Tim would ask these questions and the guy would answer with like 1 or 2 words, and it was horrible. So it's not always Tim's fault. But then the other thing I don't like is, despite the quality of the episode, and Tim had to know it was shit. Like if you look at the comments from this episode, people are like, oh man, that must have been a hard one to get through. But you hear the same thing before where he's up there, oh, this is going to be an awesome episode. We're going to get to talk about some great life hacks. So he hypes it up, and then you listen to it and it's like, no, it was kind of the opposite of that. So yeah, it's not always his fault. I think he's a great interviewer, super smart guy, but you can't control your guests sometimes. And that guest was an awesome person. He was just nervous or doesn't like the spoken word or something else wrong with his brain.
Yeah, that one doesn't ring a bell. You'll have to tell me once we stop recording. And one more plug for one of the guests. So Rolf Potts, who wrote that book, Vagabonding. I thought his couple episodes were fantastic. I've listened to them multiple times, and it's really, it made me think about how I was like approaching life and like what I'm valuing and how I'm spending my time and that sort of thing. So I think it's a 2-parter and people should check it out. So I started listening, or I heard those episodes right when I was like starting my side hustles and stuff. And it really just made me look at like my corporate career versus working for myself and like what I wanted to do longer term. And I could go on and on about it, but check out that episode, Rolf Potts, somewhere in the 40s, I think. So, all right. I'm going to mention a couple specific shows, and these are sort of hit and miss as well. These are 2 pretty long form shows. So Lex Friedman, I saw him on, I guess, Joe Rogan's show, and he's a computer science, I guess he's a professor at MIT or a researcher at MIT. Super smart guy, does a lot of AI things and interviews a wide range of people. His interviews are great. He sounds very monotone at first and not too excited, but once you work through and warm up, great interviewer. And I think I told you about Lex Friedman, so you started listening a little bit too, right?
Yeah, you did. Lex is great. He's the type of person who I think I could go up and talk to, and it would seem like an old friend. He's not trying to pump stuff up. He doesn't have that nasal radio voice. Welcome to 107.5 The Bear. He just seems like a honest, curious person who just wants to learn about stuff for himself. Just very genuine, and I love that one. It's great. It is monotone. His delivery is a little bit weird, but I think that's what makes it good too. That's his power.
And he has a big YouTube channel, and I mean he wears a suit for all of his shows, which is quite the contrast. Carl and I coordinated with plain white t-shirts today, really classy. Another show that I listen to is Huberman Lab. So this guy, another researcher, very smart neuroscientist, some long form shows, usually about an hour and a half. And it's like listening to a very dense college lecture on a specific topic. And I'll go some days where I can listen to him, several shows in a row, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then sometimes I'm just not in the mood, and it'll be a few weeks before I listen to another one. But he covers, fitness, he covers learning, stuff like that. Really cool stuff.
Sure. I'll throw out a couple more. You ever listen to the Jocko Willink podcast, Doug?
I haven't. I've just heard him as a guest on other shows.
Yeah, they're super long, folks. If you think our podcast is long, some of his go for almost 4 hours, but he's very good. He's a really good interviewer. He was originally on Tim Ferriss. He was a Navy SEAL commander. And he started his own consulting company after that, and then Tim encouraged him to do his podcast, and now he does that. But yeah, they're very long, and they're very good too. I think everyone I've listened to is excellent. Some of them are very difficult. The last one I listened to was about this journalist who embedded herself in Iraq when ISIS was running rampant over the country. Don't listen to it if you're sensitive. You'll hear some of the worst things about humanity that you've ever heard. I think there's value in listening to that. It makes you appreciate your life a little bit more. But yeah, Jocko is a very good interviewer. You already mentioned Lex Friedman, who's great. Joe Rogan, I listen to him on a guest-by-guest basis. I think the thing I like about him is he doesn't have a filter. So kind of like Lex, he just wants to get to the truth and learn and figure shit out. So I enjoy him. I thought his ones with, I'm an Elon Musk fan, but I thought his ones with Elon Musk were pretty good. But yeah, Joe Rogan.
I have a couple others. So on the entrepreneurship front, Tropical MBA, great show. It's been on the air since I think like 2009 or something like that. And they cover, location independent entrepreneurs, and they have some businesses that they've created and sold, and really smart guys. Dan and Ian, I actually interviewed Dan for my other podcast, The Doug Show, about a year ago. I actually need to get in touch with him and interview him again, see what's been going on. Those guys are great. And Smart Passive Income, that sort of started everything for me from a side hustle and affiliate marketing perspective. I don't listen to the show anymore. I haven't listened to many of the recent shows, so I'm not sure, what Pat Flynn is talking about, but it's a perfect gateway to get into side hustles, working for yourself, working online, and all that kind of stuff. And then the last one that I'll mention here is completely unrelated. It's a guitar podcast, and it's a couple YouTubers. It's called Dipped in Tone, and I think they're mostly electric guitar players, but I just like their personalities. So this is one of those where I don't even have an electric guitar, and these guys are just fun to talk or listen to them talk and just have conversations about the stuff that they're doing. So there are a couple YouTubers, professional musicians. One guy has a pedal company. I don't even know the other dude's name. So I've been listening to them occasionally, probably listened to 6 or 7 shows.
Cool. I have 2 more. The first one is Animal Spirits. So that's with Michael Batnick and Ben Carson. The whole thing isn't perfect. Sometimes they'll go into stuff I don't care about, like Bitcoin. But generally, it's very good. They cover a wide range of finance topics. And usually I learn something every time I listen to it. And they're pretty entertaining, too. So I like that one a lot. That one comes out twice a week. And the last one, I'm obsessed with Tesla. So Rob Moore, the Tesla Daily podcast, is really, really good. And I like him because, well, he has a slight bias towards Tesla and the company. If there's negative stuff, he's not afraid to come out and say it. So you just don't get this fanboy cheering how great Tesla is, even after their autopilot almost ran over a kid and then smacked into a concrete pillar in Seattle. So he tells it like it is for the most part. So Tesla Daily.
I think that guy might have been on the Smart Passive Income.
He was.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say that sounds familiar. So very cool. Yeah. Full circle. All right. I think that covers it for Matt's question. Phone apps, podcast. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. And I actually just thought of one follow-up. So we mentioned a lot of different shows. We're obviously consumers of podcasts. We're doing this one. Where do you, as like a podcast host, want to fit? Like, are any of these people folks that you look up to and you're like, hey, I'd love to be a combination of, this person and this other person or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. That's a really great question. And I have thought about that. And I think the closest one to us, and sometimes he's an asshole, but it would be Joe Rogan, I guess, because it's just a free-flowing conversation. And I think he's pretty much in it for himself. He goes wherever the conversation takes him. He might not go on as crazy as tangents as us, but yeah, I feel when I listen to him, you're just listening to a conversation between 2 friends. And I think we should send Joe Rogan a neon green tank top whenever we get those done. Maybe he'll wear it on the air.
Yeah, I follow him on Instagram, and I think if we get tattoos of his face somewhere on our body, that usually gets his attention. So
I thought you already had that, no?
No, not yet. It's just, what do they call it? A henna. Yeah, it was just a practice one, a henna tattoo, just to see what it would look like. So, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think in my head, I like his style as well. Hit and miss, like we talked about. We listen to Joe's show, but usually it's based on the guest and that sort of thing. So, and I do like Lex a lot, even though, I knocked him for the monotone, but like maybe a combination of Joe Rogan and Lex would be great. Cause I do like the really deep intellectual questions and, getting into feelings, and Lex talks about love all the time, so I think a combo of those two would probably be pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. This one's from Jonathan. How do you guys think about estate planning? When did you start thinking and planning, if you already have, or when did you start planning about what to do with your wealth after you died? So, yeah, this is a deep question, and I know we'll be able to give vastly different answers. You have 2 daughters, so you have a family to think about. So, Carl, what have you done?
Yeah, so I started thinking about this question about 1 minute after he sent it to us. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're in completely different situations, and I'll answer this in 2 parts, the kids and then just money in general. I once heard a pretty great quote. It was either from Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. I think it was Warren Buffett. And he's got like $65 billion. And his quote was, I'm going to give my kids the money to do something they want, but not anything they want. And what that means is he's going to give them some money, but not a shit ton of it. Like most of his money is going to go to charity. He's got a foundation. I think he's going to give it to Bill Gates, actually, Bill Gates Foundation. Despite that, I think each kid still gets $10 million, which is a pretty good chunk of change. But anyway, I think that's a pretty healthy thing to do with your kids. And that's what I'm going to do with mine. Funny enough, on the way over here, I dropped my daughter off, my older one, and I had a conversation with her about this very thing. We're pretty open as a family. They know that we're well off. And I told her, Claire, we've got a lot of money, but that's mom and dad's money. We're certainly going to help you out. But I want you to appreciate the work we put into it, and I want you to appreciate things like college. And I think having you work for at least part of it is a good idea. I remember I was like that. My parents didn't pay for my college. I got loans, so I knew I was paying for the whole thing. And God, my loans were like $50,000 at the end. And up until I got my first real job, I was minimum wage, like $3.35 an hour. That dates me. But it made me appreciate it. I didn't screw around in college. I'm not going to go for a path that has a questionable income revenue after I graduate. I'm going to go for math, science, computers, stuff I know will get me a decent job. And hopefully I'll enjoy it too, but I need to pay these loans back and I want to get to a better place in life. And with our kids, so they'll definitely pay for some of their school. And we're not going to... Sorry, kids, if you're listening to our podcast, which they aren't. If so, they wouldn't have made it this far. But yeah, I don't think we'll leave all the money to them either. Or what you got to figure out is some way to leave people money in a way that they're just not going to blow it. Because a lot of people come into money and then poof, it's gone very shortly after. And I want them to really have an appreciation for what we did to earn this money. And I want them to appreciate the value of hard work and that they need to make their own way. We're just not going to give it to them. My daughter had a funny comment along these lines. She's like, yeah, Dad, I want to be financially independent too. I'm like, oh, really? That's a great thing to aim for. You should totally do that later on in your life when you grow up. She's like, no, Dad, you don't understand. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I want to be financial. I want to do it right now. I'm like, what? She's like, well, I know, Dad, that you don't have a real job like most of my friends' parents. I want to do the same thing. I don't want to go to school anymore. I just want to be done with it all. That is not how this works. There's a big part in between the financial independence and the school, and it is called a job. And if you want this life, you're going to have to do that part of it too. She's like, oh, I was hoping I wouldn't have to. Like, nope, this doesn't come for free. Sorry, child. So I don't know. We haven't formalized all our plans yet, but I look forward to giving the money away. And one last thing I'll say about this, and my initial plan when I thought about this in the past was just to go like crazy, save as much as we can now, and then upon our death, it'll go to charity. But someone had a good point. They're like, why not start doing that a little bit ahead of time? Like, what if you could give money to your community, like real giving that's in close proximity to you? There's a word for this, which I don't know or a term for it, but where you can actually see the the value of it. And there's value into giving you a big charity too. If you've researched it, that they're going to use your money efficiently. But what if you could like help your school out now by buying them solar panels, or do something for your local community, and you can actually see your money in use while you're alive. And we've done a little bit of that on a small scale, but I look forward to doing more of that in the future. So the short answer is our kids will not get most of our money. Some worthy organization will get it.
Gotcha. And that makes a lot of sense to, give to the charity while you can enjoy it and appreciate it. And, why not do it when you can enjoy it and get some of that, not necessarily recognition, but just see what you were able to contribute and the people enjoying it or using it, finding utility, whatever it happens to be. Very cool. And then is there any other like estate planning things that one has to think about? I don't even really know.
I just learned what the word probate is, and I think that's when the state has to figure out what to do with your money. So there's value before you croak and putting a will together, or at least writing something down. So someone knows what the hell you wanted your money to go to. And I think even if the state manages it, I shouldn't talk about this because I don't know really anything about it, but you should really write it down so you can decide versus having some organization who might not have your best interests in mind. I'm curious to hear your answer to all these questions. Is it all going to Georgie? Georgie probably won't outlive you, but if she does, like if you fall off Long's Peak.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we can get Georgie whatever kind of food she wants, but we haven't figured it out, we don't have kids, just to make sure everyone knows that. So we don't have any kids. We both have plenty of nieces and nephews, though. And I think potentially, that would be something to give some money to. But yeah, we haven't thought about planning specifically what exactly is going to happen, especially like if we both died like younger, and then we'd had to, the money would need to go somewhere. So yeah, we haven't planned much. And as I just think out loud here, I would probably, get it to some of the nieces and nephews, similar what you're talking about with your kids, Carl, not to give them a free ride or anything like that, but to set something up, maybe set some clauses around it, maybe like a Brewster's Millions style situation. Did you ever see that movie with Richard Pryor? Right?
I have. It's been a long time. That's an old movie.
Yeah, it's good movie. It was set in Chicago, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, John Candy as well. Look it up, people. It's a good movie. I think it's a remake. But anyway, the premise is the person like Richard Pryor had to do something to get his full inheritance. So I don't think I would set up anything super challenging, but it could be, something more interesting than just like, here's a shitload of money, figure out what to do with it. And we have, nieces and nephews. Some are about to start college. Some are like, 3. So there's a wide range. And I think depending on, what they end up doing, it'd be great to maybe if they finish college, right? Here's like a challenge. If they finish college, then they get it to pay off loans, but they can't use it for anything else. So something where like they had to accomplish something, they had to do it themselves. I think there's great value in like being challenged and, paying for your own car, paying for your college. Even if you have to get loans, like, the true value versus, I think we've all had friends who had a lot of things given to them. They didn't have to work through some of the challenging shit. And well, I think it can be fine, but we could certainly find examples where people had a little too much given to them and they were maybe a little more entitled. So,
yeah, that's interesting. Do your nieces and nephews, I assume you have not discussed that with them, but you might get a phone call after this episode if they watch Uncle Doug's podcast.
Yeah, no, I haven't talked to them at all, but I did the last trip back to Atlanta. I did tell a couple of my older nieces and like their whole family about Mr. Money Mustache, pointed out the blog, mentioned you, and I was like, hey, you guys should check out this stuff because my oldest niece, she is very interested, and she heard an interview with Pete, and she really liked what he was saying and how he approached things. So hopefully, I've steered, I just gave him a little information, not enough, didn't push him. I was like, yeah, you should check out this stuff. I think you could be interested. So they kind of dug in. So
cool. How incredible would that be if they actually took that information and ran with it? Like, I've tried to do that. I'm probably the weird uncle because whenever I have people in my family graduate, I give them like The Millionaire Next Door or The Simple Path to Wealth. And then I ask them like a year later, next time I see them, like, how was the book? And their eyes kind of glaze over. Oh, yeah, it was great. I'm like, okay, so you didn't actually read it. But it's fine. You can't, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I wonder what I would have thought when I was like 18, if I was given like The Simple Path to Wealth, for example. I think I was probably weird enough. I would have dug in, and then I think I would have retired when I was like 28 or something. But I mean, I needed to go through all the things that I did, but at the same time, I could have made some very different decisions during those early years, So
sure. I have one more final thing to say on this topic, Doug, that this conversation has triggered in my mind. I actually wrote about this on the blog a while ago, and I talked about leaving my children money after death. And this guy had what I thought was a pretty great comment. He's like, I'm a little bit older than you. My kids are older. They're done with school. I know they both know what they're doing with money. I know they see it for what it is. It's a valuable resource that shouldn't be wasted. So he's like, I could either leave them money upon my death, which is probably still 30 or 40 years ago, and it would still be useful to them, but not nearly as much as if I did something now for them. So what I've done for them is I've bought them houses. I know they're not going to act crazy because I've done this, but I know I've set them ahead by decades by doing this. I've taken the single biggest expense for most people. I know that they'll save the money that they're saving by not having to pay the mortgage payment. And I think there's value to that. You got to be really careful. Like, maybe I'm too sensitive about this or think too much, but I would be really, really mad if I did that for my children. And then I come back like a week later and they've got some brand new car or some shit and they're not maxing out their 401ks. And maybe I'm too worried about that kind of stuff, but I've thought about that. Maybe I would do something like that for my kids. But if I was absolutely sure they were in a good place and that there's other issues, like you could have a spouse come in there. So maybe the house would stay in their name, and if they have a well-adjusted spouse, their spouse should be okay with that. But another litmus test, right?
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough one because, like you said, if they start buying a bunch of stuff that they don't need or whatever, then you're sitting there judging them.
Yeah, and I would.
Yeah. So I could see myself thinking, you know what? I don't want your money. I just want to be able to do whatever I want. I don't want to hear, noise complaining about, the purchases or whatever, but hopefully Elizabeth can't hear me up there. But yeah, it gets complicated fast since you're dealing with like people and their emotions. And then you mentioned, oh, what if a spouse comes into play? And then, super complicated really fast with just 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, maybe I'll just keep all my money and leave it to some hamster foundation or something. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. We have a meaty question coming up. So this is from Gabriel. I'll read it out for us here. So this is Gabriel from the comment before, and really appreciate you listening, Gabriel, and your awesome feedback. I know we gave you a little bit of a hard time, but it's hard to get honest feedback from people. So we do appreciate it, even though we tried to answer some of the questions. Okay, here is Gabriel's question. I read The Simple Path to Wealth, and I remember JL saying that the house is included in assets that you include in your 4% withdrawal. So my question is broader and probably would be more of how a live example of 4% works. I get the premise, however. So how exactly do you apply inflation rate A live example when you would actually, I should have read this a little bit more closely. A live example when and where you get the number. How does it change when inflation goes up and the market goes down? How do you make your withdrawal all at once for the year or pull it out monthly? So several different questions here, and we'll read out each one as we tackle them here. And then finally, do you guys use the value of your home and your final number to withdraw your 4%? So I know that for a fact, Carl is more versed and a little bit smarter in these areas. So I'm going to let you hit it first.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different questions here. So the first one I want to talk about is the simple path to wealth question, where he says, Jim Collins stated the house is included in assets that you include in your 4% withdrawal. I actually do not remember that. And if I'm wrong, please correct me if you're listening to this, or if anyone else has read this, but the 4% rule is based upon a mix of bonds and stocks. I think it was a 60-40 mix, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. I don't remember the house being in that equation. But this is a tricky thing, and I've had this question come up before, and I think about it often, and I don't think the house should be included in your 4% withdrawal rate. And that's for a bunch of different reasons. But one is, let's say you have $500,000 in stocks and bonds and $500,000 in the house, and you need $40,000 to live off. That house, well, great, even if it's paid off, that $500,000, it's not going to, you're going to withdraw, you're going to be at an 8% withdrawal rate, and you're going to burn through your money much quicker. With that said, I think the house is a pretty, all the equity in it doesn't mean nothing. If you got into a bad situation, you could sell your house. Houses aren't as liquid as obviously an ETF or a bond fund, but you could sell your house. So the way I personally look at it is I want to have all the money in my stock portfolio to account for that 4% withdrawal rate. And the house is just icing on the cake. It might be a little bit of a bonus at the end if the house appreciates like crazy, or it might not. I think houses are a little bit more, check that. I was going to say houses are more volatile than the stock market, but they usually move hand in hand. That was actually a dumb thing to say. The stock market is way more volatile. What am I trying to say here? Houses don't move as predictable as the stock market. You always know stocks are up and to the right if you've read The Simple Path to Wealth, if you give it enough time. And houses kind of are that way, but then you have anomalies like 2006, and you have other things that can affect houses. And houses are local too. If you bought in a place like Longmont 10 years ago, you're doing really, really, really well. Maybe not so much if you're in a Midwestern city, which hasn't fared so well since the recession. So a house is icing on the cake, but I personally would not include it in my calculations. It might be just a little bit of a buffer to put my mind at ease. How about you, Doug? How do you think about your house?
So I'll backtrack before I answer that. I also listened to the audio version of Simple Path to Wealth, like Gabriel. I don't recall that a house is in your assets either. So I agree with you. And again, someone can correct us if we're mistaken, but I don't recall that. As far as the house, yeah, we don't consider it. In fact, once we started our path to FI, we basically wanted to only look at our taxable accounts. So even though we had money that we contributed to our retirement accounts, 401k, Roth, other vehicles that we may have, we didn't even consider that anymore. In fact, once I started, there's probably some issues with this, but once I started down the path, I was like, fuck it. I'm not putting anything else in my 401k. I'm just putting things into my taxable accounts because we have fairly significant amounts in our 401ks, and we can't get to that until we're 55. I know you can in certain instances, but basically we started just putting money into our taxable accounts. So those are our, I have it in E-Trade. My wife has some other account, and then we're just in index funds there. So.
Oh, Doug, this is really interesting. I'm sorry, we're going to go on a little sidetrack here, but don't worry, Gabriel, it is related to money. So I'm curious, have you considered a Roth 401k at least, because, you couldn't get to your money till you're 55, but then that money is growing tax-free from that point on. You don't have to pay any taxes no matter what it does, I assume. And you don't do a Roth IRA either? Or?
We did when we could, or I did when, what's the cap? It's like 130,000 a year. So there's a not a salary cap, there's a annual income cap. So at some point you can't contribute to a Roth anymore.
Okay. So you don't consider the Roth 401k, which you could do. You don't consider that either, just because you want everything to be post-tax.
Correct. And I'm trying to remember, it was around the same time that I arrived at, hey, I want to make sure I can get to the money before I'm 55 or 59. So, and it was right around that time when I started earning too much to contribute to a Roth.
Okay. One thing I think is undervalued is the value of a post-tax strategy. What you said right there, capital gains don't kick in till like 82,000, 80,000. It's somewhere right around there. And then you're married, so you have a standard deduction of 24,000. You'd have to sell a shitload of stock, assuming you have no other income and you're retired. You would have to sell a shitload of stock to pay any taxes on that. The tax laws could change, but assuming they stay the way they are now, and by the way, they hike that up every year for inflation. So we've got a lot in post-tax too, just because we've got lucky with some shares. And if we play our cards right, we might never have to pay any taxes on any of it, just because we don't need a lot to live on. Post-tax is underrated, assuming the tax laws stay the same. And that's a pretty big assumption.
Right. And I think, part of it, and I've alluded to this a few times, is we were sort of casual, like FI followers. And we were moving generally in the right direction. But some folks definitely follow things much more strictly, really try to, budget every cent, reduce costs as much as possible, and like all of those things. And we were definitely more flexible. I didn't do as much research. Super interesting stuff. But as I looked at it, I was like, you know what? I know there's some mechanisms, like there's ways you can, I've just heard people talk about it. So I know there's certain things you can do to get around not being able to access that retirement money for, what is it, 59 and a half, right? So I know there are certain ways you can get around it, but my eyes glaze over and I get really bored thinking about it. We were just chatting with someone the other day, and they mentioned like the backdoor Roth and doing all this stuff. And basically they said it was a huge pain in the ass. Is it possible? Sure. Lots of people do it, but I enjoy being a little more sloppy and just like overcompensating at the things that I'm good at, which luckily I've been successful in my business. So it's been easier for me to earn more money and save that than to figure out like the other mechanisms to get around some of the rules that are out there. So how far off am I on all this stuff? Because I know when I've chatted with some people, they're like, oh, why don't you just do this and that and the other thing?
Oh, that's a great question. I think after a while, it just becomes diminishing returns. I know, you can optimize and do all those things, and they might have a lot of value, and it might be millions of dollars in value at the end, but what's the difference between... I got to back up a second and talk about something before I answer this question, because I don't want to sound like an asshole. So, Mindy and I learned about financial independence, and we just worked our asses off for 10 years. I wrote a blog post about it called The Death March to Financial Independence. And we had kids at the time too. So all I'd do is work at this job for 40 or 50 hours a week, work on a house for probably 50 or 60 hours a week. And that was pretty much it. And we did that for like a decade. Like I remember our friends would come over and they're like, oh, what's going on with this zombie TV show? Have you seen this episode? And I'm like, shit, I haven't watched TV in years. So we worked very, very, very hard and sacrificed our life. And I wouldn't recommend this. I would rather have, what I'm getting to here is we've saved up more than we need. Even now we have enough to coast for the rest of our life. And by the time we're older, it'll probably be much, much more. If I could do it over again, I would have less money and have spent some time on my bike and doing more valuable things with my time. But with that said, and back to your original question, you can do all these little optimizations and tweaks, but at the end, it just becomes a point of diminishing returns. And if it doesn't interest you, if you would rather spend your time making YouTube videos than worrying about all this little shit, then don't bother with it. But on the other hand, I would argue that it might be worth talking to a fee-only advisor and see if there's some really simple things that you might be able to do. And he could even do them for you. If something you do now, you're still pretty young, Doug, you have over half your life, there might be something that you could do now that a financial advisor might say, oh, you could do this and I could do it for you for this flat fee or whatever. So you might spend a couple thousand now, but that might be worth hundreds of thousands or millions down the road. So if you don't want to do it, don't, but perhaps talk to someone who could guide you. And it would just be an hour conversation. Here's my situation. All this stuff isn't that complicated. It's just that you don't want to, apparently you're lazy, Doug, and don't want to spend the time looking at it, but someone else could.
Yeah.
You're not lazy. You just don't want to spend the time on that thing. You want to do what you want to do. And, I don't even know what I've heard that before. And I'm the same way, Doug, and I probably should talk to someone too. I just too lazy to, I don't give a shit to look at it. You do some kind of conversion and makes it like taxable to tax-free. I know that much, but I'll probably do what I just suggested to you, Doug, at some point.
Yeah.
Especially after Mindy leaves her job, because now there's issues with income. So we do maximize things now with the 401k to reduce our taxable income. But after that's done, we probably will talk to someone and see what moves we should make to convert some of that money. So we've paid the taxes on it up front. One thing I do think, another random comment is I do think tax rates will go up. There's a lot of government debt. It continues to go up. So something's going to have to give at some point, and I don't know what it is, but if you can get your money into some kind of tax-free situation, I think you'll be a lot better off in the long run. And that's all I have to say about that, just like Forrest Gump.
So a couple quick ideas before we tackle the rest of Gabriel's question here. So one is, I think we may have guests on the show, is it Eddie and Travis, who have a fee, or they have a new advisory practice, right?
Yes, Downshift Financial, I believe is their name. Yeah, they could talk about this much more eloquently than apparently either of us can. So we will have them on the show shortly.
And I know I imagine it could be frustrating, especially for the folks, you listener, that you know the answer and you know how to do the backdoor Roth and all this stuff. But I think the thing that's promising and helpful for people is Carl and I have figured stuff out. We've done pretty well. We don't know all those details. So if you can optimize even better than us, like, you're in great shape. Like, we've been able to pull it off, and we hardly know anything.
Yeah, we're like the lowest common denominators. So yeah, there are much smarter people in the audience, and wave to us as your net worth surpasses ours, and maybe buy me a Tesla too if it really goes crazy.
You've been talking about that for a while. I'm going to be disappointed if you don't have one by the end of the year here.
You're going to be disappointed then, Doug. Unless you buy me one, Doug. That could be a way to quell your disappointment.
Maybe we could do some kind of ride share thing. We've talked about that before, like have it, part of the HQ package. I don't know. So
Doug, I want to just go on a slightly different tangent just for a second. I know you're a pickup truck guy. But it's an old pickup truck. He's kept it. He maintains it well. So don't throw Doug under the pickup truck because he owns a pickup truck. But I have a confession, Doug. I put a reservation on that ugly ass Tesla Cybertruck. What do you think about that thing? Have we discussed this before?
Only briefly. I didn't love the looks, but it was fine. So you ordered one?
Yeah, it's only $100 and it's completely refundable. And if you asked, I do not think I will actually go through with the purchase, but I might too. I don't know. You can have it wrapped like Tesla supposedly. Do you know what car wrapping is, where they like change the color of the car?
I'm vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Tesla's going to do custom wrappings for it. So you'll be able to pick out the color because it's a stainless steel body. So it looks like a DeLorean, if you're familiar with those. But like we could have a MHFi thing with like your face on one of the doors and my face on the others, and drive that thing around town for advertising. And
that'll be awesome.
People laugh at us, or maybe throw stuff at us, but it's supposed to be indestructible, right? You could shoot at it and At least a low caliber bullet won't penetrate it. But I'll let you know if I go through that purchase. It'll be another couple of years before that thing comes out.
I was going to say it'll be like 5 years before you even would see it. So, all right. So the other part of this question, so the green conclusion here is don't include your home in the 4%. And your example at the very beginning, Carl, is perfect. While it could be valuable, you're not going to be able to easily pull income out of it. So don't consider your house in the 4%. Okay. Next is, how exactly do you apply inflation? So how do you consider inflation?
So the inflation rate is actually baked into the 4% rule. And to back up a second, calling it the 4% rule is a bit wrong. When this thing was originally written by Bill Bengen, it was just a very loose rule of thumb. Rule sounds very stringent, and that's not what it was. This is just meant to be a loose guideline. But when he wrote this, he said you ratchet up every year for inflation. And he had one view on it. Other people have different views on how to do it. Some people think you should take the government target inflation rate, which is between 2 and 3% every year. And I forgot what it is exactly, but they just use that exact same number. Other people say you should take the real inflation rate, which, for example, might be a lot more this year, but not so much in other years. So the bottom line with this one is the 4% rule accommodates that already. You're going to take out whatever your 4% is the first year, and then every year ratchet it up for inflation.
Perfect. The only thing that I'll add is I think as long as you sort of keep an eye on how things are going. So like you said, inflation this year is probably going to be higher. Who knows what the future is going to bring, even though the target may be 2 to 3% or whatever. It could be lower, it could be higher. And I think we all should probably keep an eye on how things are going. Typically you have sort of a war chest of money, doing its work for you. And you have many years to course correct. So if you're overrunning what you expected in real terms, you can maybe not go on as many vacations or do as much the following year or a couple years after. Or if you have a great year and you're ahead of where you thought you would be, then maybe you could spend a little bit more and take a bigger vacation that year. So it's just valuable to keep an eye on things. You don't have to look every day. You check out your accounts like every day, right?
Pretty much every hour on some days. And unfortunately, I'm not joking.
I'm more of a quarterly. I'll take a look. So I don't even know if the stock market's up or down on any given day, unless someone told me about it.
The stock market, and with that said, I do not take action. I find it entertaining. So it's my form of watching TV. But sure. Doug, I actually just had a bad experience with inflation. Before I go into that real quick, the thought I've had is I don't think inflation affects the early retiree as much as it affects normal people. Like, what's the big thing inflation lately? It's been gas, like fuel for your car. And we don't drive that much, so it's not an issue. Clearly, you and I don't spend a lot on clothes. This T-shirt came in a 4-pack or 3-pack at Costco. That was like $12. Food, we're not on business trips. I guess if you were on that, your company would pay for it. But if things did get bad, we just don't take a vacation and we eat at home more. So I don't think inflation affects us as much. But I had a very bad experience with inflation just yesterday, Doug. The good news is nacho fries are back at Taco Bell. So I took my daughter there. She wanted to go for the nacho fry box, which used to be $5 up until like last time it came out a month or two ago. Yesterday, I went to Taco Bell, and it was $5.99, so like 20% inflation. Like, holy shit. So we might have to scale back the Taco Bell nacho fry habit, which is probably a good thing anyway, less spending on medical care down the road.
I haven't had those before. That sounds pretty good, though. I mean, I like nachos, and I like fries, so. Yeah. What are they? They're just... It's like fries and...
Yeah, they're fries. They put some red seasoning on them. Who knows what that is? The problem with it is they're always like cold and shitty when they come out. Like, I don't know what... At least our local Taco Bell has not gotten that part right. And they give you one of that big fake cheese like Vada shit that you can dip them in. Pretty good, but not good for you.
I think that could be a cool thing to make at home. Like, I don't know if you've seen this YouTube... you know what? I can't remember the name of the YouTube channel, so I'll just stop here. But he'll occasionally, it'll be some dish like a Taco Bell entree, and then he'll make it with premium ingredients and do a really good job. He's a chef, so he'll spice it up and make it much better. So sounds pretty good.
Oh, I like that. Where has that YouTube channel been my whole life?
I'll have to look that up. So maybe we'll put a link. We're bad at show notes, so we'll see. Okay, and then the final thing here from Gabriel mentions, do you make the withdrawal all at once for the year? And what is the advantage of doing that versus monthly?
I think there's a huge advantage of doing it as needed. And I'm going to refer back to one of the Mad Scientist blog posts. He talks about the value of front loading, which means as soon as you have money, you invest it. So if you want to max out your 401k, you should max it out in January, like do it as soon as possible. And that's because most days on the stock market are up days. Of course, it's going to go up and down, but most of the time, and I don't know what the exact numbers are, it goes up. And I think it's not that much different. It might be like 54, 46. So what that tells you is you should always have as much money in the market and not in cash. If you have it in cash, you're losing money to deflation. Once you sell it, you're spending money for the year. You're going to have it in cash, which isn't good. So I'm not at the point yet because Mindy still works, but when we do it, we would probably do it maybe not quite monthly, but maybe quarterly. I definitely would not want that whole chunk of money sitting around in my account for the entire year, though. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And we too are not at a point where we're still in the accumulating phase. My wife has a full-time job like yours, so we get insurance through her company, and then I work online, which I'll probably continue doing for a while until I'm not having fun anymore, and it's enough to pay for our expenses and save some as well. So we're not in the phase where we're making any withdrawals or anything. But like you said, if you don't need the money right away, you may as well leave it in the market, and you can set up, probably with any of the brokerages to pay out the dividends monthly or however you want to do it. So currently the way I have it set up, and are you on E-Trade too? Or
I'm about to go back to E-Trade actually, which is but I know what you're talking about. You can either have it automatically reinvest or take the cash.
Yep. So you can set it up that way, however you want to do it, or set up monthly, transactions and transfers into your account, however you want to do it. There's a good chance you may end up in a situation like myself and many other people where you work a little bit and it may be enough to cover your costs, so you wouldn't actually have to make any withdrawals. So it could be valuable, and it's great, Gabriel, that you are thinking about all the details here. But once you start moving in the right direction and you accumulate a certain amount, usually you have a lot more flexibility than it feels like, especially when it's called the 4% rule. It's like the 4% guideline, but that's not as sexy and it doesn't sound as official. As long as you're moving and trending in that direction, you're probably going to be very confident at the end when you've accumulated what you think you need. And depending on what's going on in the world, the stock market may be growing a lot. Maybe it's a little more stagnant. I mean, we've been growing for many years, so I wouldn't be surprised if we have a couple level years here in the next 10 or something. I mean, that's probably a pretty good bet that we're going to have 2 or 3 level years, something like that, out of the next 10 or 12. So I was kind of going all over the place, but
I have one statement and then I have a follow-up question for you, Doug. So I'm about to say probably the most controversial and maybe hated thing I've said yet on the podcast. I hate dividends. I don't like them. But the thought I had the other day actually is we have close to $1 million in VTSAX. I think that pays out like 2%. And you just alluded to this with what you said, so I think we're on the same page here. Is 2% of $1 million is $20,000. So if you're pretty frugal and lean, that's going to cover a lot of your expenses, and you won't have to touch it. So anyway, the question I have for you, which really isn't based on that, but would you have a hard time moving to a situation like now, you're still in the accumulation phase. Would it be hard for you the first time to actually like sell stuff and start drawing down that big chunk of change?
Me? No. I don't think I'd have an issue with it. I think my wife, who's upstairs, she may be able to hear me. I think she would have more of an issue because at that point, money's not coming in. So we've gone through so many years where money was coming in, and now money's not coming in. We're actually like starting to interfere with the, growth there. For me though, because I did the corporate thing for a while and then I figured out how to earn money myself, I'm confident that I could earn money even if I got a job or whatever, but I could also like start a business again. Like I feel like that's a skill that I have now, and you can do that. Like there's always a problem to be solved. And that is, the foundation of like a good business, I think. So I wouldn't have an issue with it just because I got a big enough head and I think I'm so awesome that I could like earn money again in the future.
Yeah, we had an episode about this a couple episodes ago. That was redundant. And it's one of the points we had in that was it's so easy to make money now. With the internet, you could take pictures of crap on your phone. I know someone who does this and puts them on some stock photo website and makes pretty good money, like not enough to sustain life. But if you can bring your 4% withdrawal down to like a 2 or 3% with some silly side hustle that you enjoy, like why the hell not? You like taking pictures. How much more effort is it to upload them to some fucking stock photo website and let people pay $1 for them or stick them on a mug? I think there's actually a mug with your face on it upstairs, Doug. We should sell those once we get that'll be product number 2 after the mesh tank top, the Doug mugs. It kind of flows too, the Doug mug.
It does flow. We'll have to figure out something for you. Maybe we can get we'll get a picture of you wearing the mesh on a mug. So it's all together, and you'll be holding one of the mugs with the image on there too.
And Doug, I have another idea around that. We'll threaten to send them to people, and they could pay us for that mug not to arrive in their mail.
And I think, oh man, I had a great idea. I have a feeling Gabriel's not going to like this one either. Thanks for being a good sport, by the way. But here's the thing: you're wearing the mesh tank top on the mug. When you fill it with a warm liquid, then the tank top disappears. You're ahead of me. Yeah. You already knew. Yeah. I think that's a great idea. It's like, any warm liquid that you want. It doesn't matter. It can be coffee, tea, other fluids that are warm.
It's so disturbing at so many levels, Doug.
Yeah.
There's one more thing I think we have to say about the 4% rule before this ends. And I think the most misunderstood part about the 4% rule is that it is a worst case scenario rule or guideline, however you want to say that. If you read Michael Kitces, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. There are most times in history you can withdraw more than the 4% rule. He had a post about it. He did all his back study, and when you withdraw 4%, a lot of times you ended up with like twice of what you initially started with after 30 years, even ratcheting it up for inflation. So the 4% rule is just if you're very nervous, and there are a couple times in history when it's failed, but it's not that frequent. We talked about this in the 4% returns, in the 4% show. Sequence of returns is what I was trying to say there. If the stock market takes a big dump right after you quit your job, you might have some issues. But what's the best time to go back to work? Probably right after you quit your job.
Yep.
So use it as a general guideline, use it as a worst case scenario, and don't be afraid to live a little, maybe even buy your friend a Tesla if your net worth does really, really well.
Awesome. So before I ask you for your final thoughts here, we have a couple things to plug. One, tell a friend about the show. If you know they like YouTube, send them the YouTube link. If they listen to podcasts, let them know. That's probably the best way that you could help us out. Some people have been asking about that. We definitely appreciate it and all the support so far. If you like to leave reviews or ratings or anything, do it on whatever podcast platform that you listen on. We appreciate that. We haven't, we see that many of them are coming in. We haven't started reading them, but that could be a segment that we add to some shows where we just read some of the comments. the glowing ones, and maybe some of the more negative ones as well, because I think those could be pretty funny. Make jokes in them. I think it'll be hilarious if you bust our balls in the reviews. And finally, we have our email list, the MHFi Club. It's our newsletter. We don't spam you. Usually I just send out a notification when the episodes come out, give you a little heads up. We're probably going to start as fall kicks in and we have a little bit more free time. We'll probably send out a little bit more, maybe more newsletter style things, maybe on a monthly basis, something like that. So we don't spam you, but sign up for that email list.
Yeah, the good thing about us, or at least me, because I'm responsible for this, is I'm too lazy to do much work on it. So Doug is correct. You won't get a million emails. Sorry, Doug.
No, that's 100% right. And I do need to give a shout out to our friend Carla, who was on this show. She's going to help us out with some of the production stuff, like maybe even writing some of the newsletter material and some other things like that. She's a very talented writer and has been a great support for the show so far.
Doug, that is a fantastic idea. One less thing that we have to do. Maybe we'll get it eventually. Get to a point where we don't have to even record or show up. The show just goes on. Yeah. I don't know how that would work. It sounds complex. And
I think it would just be us sending Marco Polos back to each other and then recording that. That would just be a train wreck. Yeah. If you think this is bad, wait until you get the Marco Polo version. All right. So any final thoughts, anything that you thought of from any of the questions? You want to wrap it up in any way? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, this is a theme that keeps on coming up, but the main thing to, especially the last question, is just to be flexible in life. Don't be super rigid. Just because someone tells you the 4% rule, you don't have to withdraw 4%. You can do less. In some cases, you can do more. Yeah, that's
cool.
it. That's it. Be flexible.
Yep, I agree. And, I'll reiterate, it's awesome that, we can get into the super detailed numbers and think about, what if we withdraw, 3.62% and, let's assume this for inflation. They're all going to be assumptions, and it's great to have that as a plan to follow. But with the real data and your flexibility, then you can adapt to whatever you need to be. And potentially, like we've said before, you can go back to work, or you could do something part-time that you enjoy, work at a store where you can get a discount, you enjoy the people, it's your tribe of folks. And I think that'd be a great way to earn a little bit of money to offset any, inflation that you may run into or poor returns that you weren't expecting right when you retired, for example. So flexibility, like you said.
Yeah, people talk about the internet retirement police and they criticize people like me for earning money. The blog makes a little bit of money. For earning money, you get like hateful tweets or emails. You're not really retired. You still do this blog. But I invented something recently. I'm going to recruit you, Doug, for this. It's called the Internet Couch Police, which is the opposite of the Internet Retirement Police. And this is if you retire and do what the Internet Retirement Police say to do, which is apparently sit on the couch and watch TV and never earn another dollar in my life, I think you're leading a very poor and pathetic life. So if you do that and your hands are orange with Cheeto dust and you're watching I Love Lucy reruns, or God, that's really dating myself. I don't know what reruns people watch now. The Internet Couch Police are going to come to your house and pry your sticky, rotund body, sweaty body off the couch and make you do some work.
All right. That's a great invention. Good thinking.
Doug, I have a badge for you in my bag. I'll give it to you after the show.
I'll be deputized. That sounds good. All right. Well, this was awesome. Please send in more questions. We'll be doing these episodes occasionally, not too often, but just enough for Carl and us to start giggling like girls. So, all right, Carl, have a good one.
Thank you. Alan and Katie Donegan are about to show up in town. And while we are in Nashville, they are going to stay at our house. And our house is quite chaotic because of these home improvements, and we just don't have our shit together despite moving there 2 years ago. But someday we hope to live in a clean, beautiful, done house, just like yours, Doug. I can Dare to dream.
I will say you're accurate. It's crazy over there. However, I was just over there. I mean, I don't want to disagree with the host, So you're right. It's nuts. But your backyard area, your patio is fantastic. I was over there recently and it'll fit like 20 people. I mean, it's a huge deck and then you have a swimming pool. So for hosting outdoors, it's fantastic.
Yep. And it's only going to get better, Doug. I'm going to build a shed, which is what all the piles of shit are in the backyard. They will eventually coagulate to form a shed, and we're going to build a hot tub platform, a pizza oven, and maybe a zip line over the pool. So I've got big plans for that backyard. It'll be awesome.
Zip line. That's great.
Can you imagine naked zip lining into the pool?
I am now. Yeah. The other thing when we were over there, well, you know what? Maybe it's a topic for another time, but it was that super lube stuff, that industrial lubricant that you guys were trying to get us to use, but we didn't need it at the time. So I think that's pretty good for the sound check. Let's see if this worked.